Hello, today we are going to take a look at a romantic science fiction movie titled, The Time Traveler's Wife. Before we begin, shout out to 0+1, Jessica Yadome, and Marilyn Canoy. Thank you for your support. If you want to get mentioned in our next video, subscribe and drop a comment. In the early 1970s, a boy named Henry and his mom are driving down a lane singing Christmas songs. Their vehicle glides out of control on the snowy road, and Henry's body starts to disappear right before another vehicle crashes onto them, killing his mother. Henry survives the accident by traveling back in time to 2 weeks earlier. He sees his parents reading to him, and again he involuntarily travels back to the time of the accident. An older version of Henry who has also traveled back in time appears to help the younger Henry. The older Henry explains to the younger Henry that they are the same person and that they time traveled. Unable to control the timing or destinations of his traveling, Henry finds himself drawn to significant people, places, and events in his life but is incapable of changing events. In 1991, Henry meets Claire in the library where he works. She is overjoyed to see him although he is meeting her for the first time and has no idea who she is. Later, Claire and Henry meet for dinner where Claire explains that she met a much older version of Henry at the meadow behind her parents' house, when she was just a little girl. She says that he informed her then that they would meet in the future, which is happening now. Claire takes out a diary and says that she wrote in it every time Henry came to visit her. She was 18 the last time she saw him. Henry is overwhelmed by all this information, but Claire tells him that she has been in love with him all her life. Afterwards, they go to Henry's apartment and make out. The scene then cuts to a time when Claire was 6 years old. Claire lays a blanket in the meadow and prepares to play with her toys, when a man behind a bush startles her and asks for the blanket. The older version of Henry walks out wrapped in the blanket and introduces himself as a time traveler to little Claire. He tells her that they are good friends in the future when she is a grown-up lady, but Claire doesn't believe him. Then Henry slowly disappears, proving that he really is a time traveler. Back in the present, Claire asks Henry what it's like to time travel. Henry explains that when he travels, he arrives at destinations completely naked. So from an early age, he had learned how to pick locks and to steal clothing to endure his travels. He also says that even though he travels to the past, he cannot change events that have already happened. Later that day, Henry checks Claire's diary and gets a list of dates when he visited her, so he can give those to young Claire and she can be waiting for him with clothes. Henry travels back in time and meets his mother on a train. He tries his best not to creep her out, so he keeps the conversation short and looks at her endearingly. Back in the present, Henry pays his father a visit. His father is aware of Henry's disorder and blames him for his wife's death, assuming that Henry could have stopped the accident from happening. But Henry says, "I have watched her die hundreds of times. I can never get there in time to change it." Then Henry's dad gives him her ring, so that Henry could propose to Claire. When Claire wakes up in the morning, Henry puts the ring on her finger and asks her to marry him, to which she says, 1,000 times yes. As days go by, they prepare for the wedding. On the day of the wedding, Henry time travels right before the ceremony. But moments later, a visibly older version of himself arrives just in time to step in, slightly confusing the guests with his gray hair. During the wedding party, Claire's dad invites her and Henry for their first dance, but Henry has time traveled again. To Claire's surprise, he appears again in his present self just in time for the dance. On their wedding night, Henry disappears again. Henry travels back to the meadow where he finds clothes kept there by young Claire. Meeting with little Claire again, she asks him if he is married and he says yes. This upsets her and she tells him that she was hoping he married her. Back in the present, Henry tells Claire, "I was at the meadow. You were jealous of my wife," and they laugh. As they settle into their married life, Henry's disappearances take a toll on his relationship with Claire. She has no choice but to spend most days alone, whereas Henry is constantly running from people that he stole money and clothes from during his travels. Henry comes back after 2 weeks, missing Christmas and New Year's, and Claire is upset over this so she goes to work. To make up for his disappearance, Henry buys a winning lottery ticket by having the numbers in advance. With the money they win, they move into a gorgeous new house. One day, Henry and Claire witness a middle-aged wounded Henry briefly arrive from another time, leaving them concerned about how long Henry must live. Claire tells him that she is pregnant and Henry is overjoyed. But being pregnant doesn't make it better for Claire. Days later, after experiencing a bleed, Claire is hospitalized where they learn that they lost the baby. Determined to fix his anomaly, Henry meets with Dr. Kendrick and goes in for some tests. During the examination, Henry travels in time, and Dr. Kendrick, who initially didn't believe Henry, is surprised to learn the truth. Devastated by the baby's loss, Claire and Henry learn that Henry's genes cause their unborn fetus to time travel. Because of this, it is impossible for Claire to stay pregnant. Claire begins to worry that she will never have a child. After numerous miscarriages, Henry has a vasectomy to end their suffering, but intends to keep it as a secret from Claire. Henry travels back in time to when Claire had just turned 18. Henry kisses Claire for the very first time, leading her to realize that he is her husband in the future. When Henry gets back home to Claire, he tells her he had a vasectomy, and Claire yells at him, feeling hurt and disappointed. That night, Claire gets a call and she leaves the house to meet with a visiting younger version of Henry. A week later, she learns that she got pregnant by him and tells Henry. 18 weeks pass and they learn that the baby is healthy and is a girl. When Henry travels forward in time, a little girl walks up to him calling him daddy. She is Alba, Henry's and Claire's preteen daughter. Alba tells Henry that she is a time traveler too, but has increasing control over when and where she travels. She has even met Henry's mother and is learning to play violin with Henry's dad. But Alba tells Henry that he will die when she is 5 years old. Henry returns back to a very pregnant Claire and tells her about Alba. Claire asks him if everything is going to be okay, and Henry says yes, hiding the fact that he will die when Alba turns 5. Eventually, Claire carries the baby to full term and gives birth to Alba. As Claire and Henry prepare to celebrate Alba's 5th birthday, Claire notices an older girl playing with Alba and asks Henry who she is. Henry tells her that she is an older version of Alba. We learn that Alba's preteen self is trying to prepare her younger self for Henry's death. After the birthday party with family and friends, Claire is devastated to discover Henry's impending death from Alba. Claire confronts Henry about it and he tells her that he is scared to face death. A while later, Claire hears Henry screaming in the hallway and finds him suffering from severe frostbite on his leg from a time jump gone wrong. Claire rushes him to the hospital and Dr. Kendrick says he will try his best to save his leg. After recovering, Henry is temporarily using a wheelchair. Alba tells him to sing with her, hoping it could prevent him from disappearing again. But Henry time travels again and finds himself at home during winter. He sees the very moment he dies in the arms of Claire. Back in the present, when it starts snowing, Henry knows that his death is nearing. On Christmas Eve, he stares at the same spot on the floor where he saw himself dying. Upon learning that Henry will soon die, Claire tells him that she wouldn't change a second of the life they have had together, and they kiss. At that very moment, Henry travels in time. Henry finds himself in a snowy forest, and he is accidentally shot by Claire's father, who is hunting deer. Henry returns home in time to die in the arms of his wife. He tells Claire how much he loves her right before he breathes his last breath. Some years later, a younger Henry visits Alba when she is 9, on the same meadow he met Claire for the first time. Claire runs to the meadow and hugs Henry, but soon after Henry disappears. Claire is hopeful that Henry will visit them again, though he told her not to spend her life waiting for him. Alba and Claire walk back home happily, having met Henry one last time. If you enjoyed this video, leave a comment, drop a like, and hit that subscribe button for more awesome movie recaps. Your support means a lot to me. Thanks, have a great day.